I was already seated when he said it. "Son, I think you should sit down for this." Funny how old habits stick. I hadn't lived in that house in over a decade, but I still took the same seat at the same mahogany table every time. Second from the head. Always the one closest to the kitchen. Across from me sat my parents, grayed now, a little smaller than I remembered. The air around them still carried that soft scent of old wood and lavender polish. "Nathan," my father began, adjusting his glasses the way he does when something uncomfortable is coming. "We've made a decision. About the estate." I already knew. Maybe not the words, but the direction. The atmosphere had shifted. My gut knew it before my ears caught up. "It's going to Melissa." There it was. 7 words that cracked open something quiet inside me. Melissa, my younger sister. Spirited. Erratic. Endlessly in need. She had failed at everything from a flower shop to a vegan cafe. And most recently, some kind of podcast startup that collapsed before it aired a single episode. I looked at them both. My mother offered a careful smile, like she was about to hand me a cookie, not a betrayal. "She needs it more than you," she said gently, reaching for my hand. I moved mine to my lap. "You've already built so much," she continued. "You have your projects. That's what they called Carter and Bennett Development. A multi-state architecture and real estate firm that bore my name and employed over 500 people. Projects. They didn't know I owned the entire block surrounding this estate. They didn't know I'd been building something far beyond this Georgian shell of tradition. But I nodded, slowly, calmly. "When did you decide this?" I asked, my voice steady. My father cleared his throat. "A few weeks ago, Melissa. She's expecting, and she's going through a hard time." Again, they didn't respond to that. Just the kind of silence that feels like an apology, but isn't one. I stood, smoothed my jacket. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My mother frowned. "Nathan, don't be like this." "I'm not being anything," I replied. "You made your decision. Now I'll make mine." As I stepped into the cold March air, I took out my phone and sent one message. "Liam, initiate Phase 2. Riverside Grand Plaza. Full scale." They gave her the house. I was about to give her something she'd never be able to ignore. The formal announcement came 2 weeks later. An invitation arrived in the mail, printed in delicate serif font on ivory cardstock. A celebration of legacy, the Bennett estate. I almost laughed. Melissa's name was at the bottom. Not mine, not even as a guest of honor. IRSVPD. Yes. No note. No comment. Just yes. The house looked just as I remembered when I pulled into the circular driveway. Lanterns had been lit across the lawn. Champagne glasses waited on trays. Our parents stood in the doorway, practically glowing. "Nathan," my mother said, her voice light with relief. "You came." "Of course," I said, handing my coat to a hired server. Wouldn't miss it. Melissa was near the fireplace. Her dress was cream-colored, too long for her frame. She looked nervous, or smug. It was always hard to tell with her. She waved me over, grabbing my elbow, as if we'd been close our whole lives. "I've got such big plans for the place," she said breathlessly. "You know that useless garden? I'm turning it into a yoga deck. And the library? We're knocking that wall down, open concept. Light, airy, fresh. You'll love it." I nodded, slowly. "Sounds transformative," she beamed. My father clinked his glass. The room hushed. "As many of you know," he began, "this estate has been in the Bennett family for generations. It's not just a house, it's our history. And tonight, I'm proud to say it will continue with our daughter, Melissa." There was polite applause, some cheers. Melissa took a half bow she didn't quite know how to pull off. My mother squeezed her shoulder. Then I raised my glass. "That's wonderful news," I said clearly, "and it goes perfectly with my own announcement." I waited. "I'm pleased to share that Carter and Bennett Development will begin construction next month. on Riverside Grand Plaza, a $500 million mixed-use development that will surround this very estate. The room fell quiet. It will include luxury residences, curated retail space, and a landmark hotel. All zoning and permits are approved. Construction begins in 30 days. I tapped my phone, projecting digital renderings onto the blank wall behind me. There it was, the future. Glass towers, lush pedestrian pathways. The Bennett estate, now just a small historical dot in a modern skyline. Melissa's face dropped. But that changes everything, she said quietly. That's the point, I replied. The morning after the announcement, I arrived at my office before the lights in the city blinked on. The sky outside was still bruised with dawn. Inside, it was quiet. The kind of quiet I liked ordered, intentional, earned. I hadn't even finished my first coffee when Isabella appeared in my doorway. She's here, she said. I didn't need to ask who. The tension in Isabella's voice made it clear. Send her up in 5, I replied, and bring the proposal folder. 4 minutes later, Melissa stormed in. Her heels clicked across the marble floor. Her cardigan was inside out. I said nothing. This is your office? She asked, breathless. One of them, I replied, standing. Boston and Seattle are slightly smaller. She stood in the center of the room, eyes darting between the city skyline and the oversized architectural renderings lining the wall. For a moment, her expression softened. Then it snapped back. You can't do this, Nathan. I already did. You're going to destroy everything. The neighborhood, the legacy. I raised a hand. The estate isn't being touched, but the character of the area is being upgraded. She moved closer, trembling with frustration. Is this because Mom and Dad gave me the house? A pause. I didn't answer right away. No, I said finally. It's because they gave you my inheritance, to fund your second chance. Melissa's lips parted, but no words came. You got the house, I continued. You got the sympathy, the safety net. Again, I got the silence. And while you were calling the library uselesses, I was hiring historians to design around it. She sank into one of the leather chairs opposite my desk. For the first time, she looked small. Not pitiful, just real. Like a person finally without a script. You've always been better at everything, she said softly. Smarter, colder. The first tilted my head. Cold? Maybe. Strategic? Definitely. I'm trying, Nathan. I studied her face, and for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Trying. In her way? I opened the folder Isabella had left on my desk and slid it across. She blinked at it. What's this? A job offer. She stared. For me? A real one. Not a role Mom and Dad invented so you'd feel important. A salaried, scoped position. You'd be the community liaison for Riverside Grand Plaza. Melissa picked up the papers slowly, like they might burn her fingers. You're offering me a job. After all this, I'm offering you the chance to do something real. No shortcuts. No golden child label. You'll report to Liam, not to me. No special favors. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. I need someone who understands the community, I added. And despite everything you do, she flipped to the benefits page, her eyes flickering with cautious disbelief. You're serious? I am. She looked up, and this time, the mask was gone. Why are you doing this? I paused. My answer surprised even me. Because I don't want revenge. I want a clean ledger. Melissa stood, clutching the folder like a fragile truce. If I take this, I want to earn it. Then start Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. She nodded once, then turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. Nathan? Yes. I'm sorry. For a lot. I didn't smile, but I did nod. Then prove it, I said. The calls from our parents started that afternoon. Voicemails, texts, emails titled urgent. I ignored them all, until my father's voice broke through in the final message. Nathan, we need to talk. Please. About Melissa? About the estate? About everything? Dinner tonight? I don't know what moved me more, the content or the tone. Not anger, not guilt. Something more foreign, remorse. I texted back, 7 p.m. Bring your questions. The estate felt smaller when I returned that evening. My mother opened the door before I knocked, her eyes hollow with worry. Thank God, she whispered, pulling me in. We've been fools. My father stood when I entered the dining room. His tie was crooked. The table was set for 3. He cleared his throat. Before anything else, we owe you an apology. I sat, waited. For not seeing you, my mother said. For not understanding what you built, my father added. They looked older in the warm light, and I wondered if I'd simply never noticed before. When we saw the renderings, my mother continued, and the scope of your company, we were stunned. Why didn't you ever tell us? My father asked. I leaned back. Would you have listened? They said nothing. My mother reached for the folder I'd brought. Inside were the updated development plans, annotated with heritage conservation overlays. As I explained each section, the sustainable design, the preservation of the Georgian corridor, the job creation, something shifted. Their faces changed, from pride to awe to humility. This section here, my father said slowly, pointing, doesn't compete with the estate. It elevates it. That was the intention, I said quietly. I wasn't trying to erase the past. I'm building over it. With respect. My mother blinked back tears. We were wrong. About you. About everything. She reached across the table again. But this time, I let her hand touch mine. We want to invest, she said softly. In your company, not as parents, as people who finally see what you've built. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, you'll get the same pitch as any other investor. No favors, just facts. That's all we want, my father replied. I gathered the plans and rose from the table. You gave Melissa the house, I said. Let her keep it. Let her earn it. They both nodded. At the door, my mother called after me. Nathan? I turned. Are we too late? I didn't smile, but I didn't close the door either. Let's find out, I said. 3 months later, the crowd gathered beneath a sky so blue it looked like it had been designed. The press arrived, first local journalists, a couple from regional outlets, one from an architecture magazine who had followed the project since zoning was approved. They buzzed around the ceremonial dig site, half-built towers already looming in the backdrop like silver spines. Rows of chairs stretched across the lawn. Banners marked the corners of Riverside Grand Plaza, flapping lightly in the breeze. I stood just off stage, adjusting my cufflinks. They were my grandfather's, his initials still etched into the gold. He'd bought them the year he laid the foundation for the original Bennett estate. Full circle. In the front row, my parents sat stiff-backed and silent. My mother wore navy, my father charcoal gray. Their expressions were proud, but humbled, like people who had once made assumptions and now lived in the clarity beyond them. Off to the side, clipboard in hand, stood Melissa. She wore a black suit. The fit was perfect. Her hair was pinned back. She looked professional, alert, and entirely unlike the version of herself who once wanted to put a yoga deck in a historical rose garden. She wasn't pretending anymore. She earned this. I stepped up to the podium. The microphone clicked on. Thank you for being here. The chatter quieted. A few camera shutters clicked. Today marks the official groundbreaking of Riverside Grand Plaza, but more than that, it marks a shift. Not just in architecture or economy, but in legacy. I paused, looking out at the people gathered. Residents, contractors, local business owners. Some were skeptical at first, unsure of the development's impact. But over the past few months, Melissa had changed that. She went door to door, held weekly Q&As, answered questions I wouldn't have had the patience to answer. When residents needed reassurance, she gave it without ego. She made them feel seen. That mattered more than steel or glass ever would. This project, I continued, was designed not to erase the past but to elevate it, to draw a line between where we've been and where we can go. We're not building over tradition, we're building with it. A pause, a breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. I want to recognize someone specific, I added, my voice steady but softer. Melissa Bennett, our community liaison, whose work made this development more human than I ever could have on my own. Heads turned. My sister looked up, startled, then straightened. She didn't smile, not fully, but her chin lifted. Her grip on the clipboard steadied. For once, she didn't look like she was pretending. She looked like someone who belonged. The applause was real. After the speeches, the first symbolic dig began. City officials took turns with gold-painted shovels. My team gathered for photos. My parents approached quietly from the side, both holding cups of coffee someone had handed them. "You did it," my father said. "Really did it." I nodded. "It's only just starting." He looked out across the site. "You've changed everything." "No," I replied. I revealed what was already possible. My mother touched my arm. "And your sister. She surprised us." "She surprised me too. She's working hard," my father added, as if still trying to make sense of it. "Every morning she's up before sunrise. Your team says she's reliable." "Good," I said. "That's all she ever needed. A chance without cushioning, and you gave it to her. I gave her the same chance I gave myself." That night, I hosted a small celebration in my penthouse. The skyline glittered outside the window, the plaza lights visible even from here, half built, half promised. Melissa helped serve drinks, her badge still clipped to her blazer. She moved differently now. Not arrogant, not apologetic, just steady. Later, she joined me on the balcony. "I still don't think I deserved that shout-out," she said, sipping ginger ale. "You didn't," I said flatly. She turned. "But you earned it." Melissa stared at the horizon. "I used to think I wasn't like you, that I couldn't be." "You're not like me," I said. "You're like you. That's the point." She didn't reply for a long moment. Then, "You think Mom and Dad really changed? Or they just want a piece of what you've built?" I shrugged. "Maybe both, but they asked to invest, not control. That's a start." She nodded. "You were right," she said. "The house wasn't the legacy. This is." "No," I replied, looking out at the towers rising across the city. "This is the beginning." The next morning, I received a message from our CFO. "Your parents completed the first phase of their investment. Schedule a quarterly review." I smiled. "Yes. Let's put them through the same due diligence as anyone else." As I walked through the Riverside site later that day, I passed a new tenant space being framed. The future was steel and sound, sawdust, footsteps, people in motion. And somewhere between the scaffolding and sunlight, I realized something. The revenge I thought I wanted had been replaced by something better. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. And that was everything. 3 months passed. And in those months, things didn't fall apart. They built up. Melissa arrived at the Riverside Plaza site every day at 7:50 a.m. sharp, clipboard in hand. Questions ready. She attended every community forum, sometimes fielding angry voices with nothing but patience and clarity. She didn't ask me for guidance. She asked Liam. She followed chain of command. She wrote reports, detailed ones. She worked weekends without being asked, and eventually, people stopped referring to her as Nathan's sister. They called her Melissa. Just Melissa. That mattered. I saw my parents more often, too. Not in family dinners filled with tension and politeness, but in meetings with balance sheets, permits, and prospectuses. They came with real questions, real investment interest. My father sat through meetings with our CFO, nodding slowly, asking about ROI and urban tax incentives. My mother printed out renderings and read every line of the environmental impact study. When they showed up to the internal quarterly presentation, they brought their own notepads. They didn't call my company your little project anymore. One afternoon, I stood at the corner of Riverside Avenue and Holloway, what had once been just 3 aging shops and an abandoned gas station. Now it was the anchor of the development. Glass panels framed a sunlit lobby. A cafe was opening next door. Public art installations were already being planned. Melissa joined me there after work. She had a smudge of dust across her cheek. I didn't mention it. The florist wants to host a weekend market in the plaza, she said. Every other Saturday. Local vendors, artisans, food trucks. Good, I said. Do it. She looked around. This feels bigger than I thought it would, she said quietly. I used to think legacy meant keeping something exactly the way it was. Now I'm not so sure. It doesn't, I replied. Legacy means leaving something better. She nodded slowly. I'm still figuring it out. So am I. She turned toward me, hesitated. Do you ever regret not fighting harder for the house? I looked at her. No, I said simply, because they gave you the house. But I built the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, I received a package from my parents. No note, just a box. Inside was a photograph. Me and Melissa standing together at the groundbreaking, shovels in hand, laughing at something off camera. Someone had printed it and framed it in oak. Underneath the photo was a small envelope. I opened it. Nathan, we can't undo the past, but we hope to invest in the future you're building. Love, Mom and Dad. It didn't fix everything, but it acknowledged something they never had before, that I had been building something long before they noticed. At the year-end team celebration, I stood at the rooftop terrace of our newly opened luxury tower. The skyline shimmered. Below, Riverside Grand Plaza buzzed with energy, live music, weekend lights, families moving through the square like it had always belonged to them. I made a toast. People think architecture is about buildings, I said. Steel, concrete, height. But it's not. It's about context. About seeing what was, imagining what could be, and making space for what should be. I lifted my glass to legacy. Not the one we inherit, but the one we choose to build. The team raised their glasses with me. Behind them, I spotted Melissa leaning against the railing. She didn't raise her glass right away. She just looked around at the plaza, the lights, the people, and smiled. Later that evening, she approached me. You said something earlier, she began. About legacy. I waited. I used to think I had to deserve what I was given, she said. But I was just afraid to build my own. I nodded. Then don't stop now. She looked down at her shoes, then back up at me. So, phase 2. Ready to bring me into the planning meetings? I laughed under my breath. Don't push it, she grinned. Just checking. As the music picked up, I stepped away to check a message. Boston Phase 2 had just been greenlit. Chicago wanted to expand ahead of schedule, and the London expansion team had requested a live walkthrough with me next week. Momentum. Not just business, but meaning. Isabella found me on the far end of the terrace. The mayor's office called. They want you to speak at next month's Urban Summit. Put it on the calendar, I said. She hesitated. Melissa gave a quote to the post, by the way. Isabella added. I raised an eyebrow. She said, my brother didn't take revenge. He gave me a chance to rise. And that's what real legacy looks like. I stared out at the city. That's her quote? Isabella nodded. I shook my head slowly, something unspoken catching in my chest. She's finally telling her own story, I murmured. And she's doing it well, Isabella said. Back in my office, the framed photo sat near my desk, not because it showed a moment of victory, but because it marked a moment of clarity. I didn't need to reclaim the past. I had shaped the future, not through fury, but through foundation, not through punishment, but through proof. And as I looked out the window at the skyline I helped redefine, I knew one thing with quiet certainty. Sometimes the best revenge is never needing it. Story 2? You know that moment when something finally snaps, not in a dramatic, glass-shattering way, but quietly, like a click inside you? That happened to me 2 days after my wedding. I'm Lily. I'm 30 now, and if there's one thing I've mastered in life, it's being the other sibling. My sister, Vanessa, now 34, has always been the star of the family. Not in a villainous, cartoonish way, but in that subtle, generational favoritism kind of way. Newest phone every year? Hers. Birthday parties with ponies and balloon arches? Also hers. I got a chocolate cupcake and a card that said, "Try harder next year" once. It became a family joke. Anyway, I stopped expecting much a long time ago. At 16, I started working weekends at a bookstore just to buy my own laptop. I didn't complain, felt good to earn things. I put myself through college, landed a job in UX design, and slowly built a quiet, independent life. Then 3 years ago, Vanessa got married. My parents? They gifted her and her new husband a whopping $400,000. Not an exaggeration. $400,000. They framed it as a wedding present. But really, it went straight into a down payment on their house in Brookhaven, a place where your neighbors drive Teslas and host wine tastings instead of barbecues. And weirdly, I was happy for her. Stung a little, sure, but I was in a good place. I'd met someone, Eli, who didn't make me feel like a footnote in my own story. He was gentle, funny, solid. We dated for years before he proposed. When he did, I ugly cried and said yes before he could finish the question. We weren't aiming for extravagance. Our budget was around $35,000. Simple ceremony, intimate dinner, thoughtful touches. Not a Pinterest wedding explosion, just something that felt like us. So when my parents offered to pay for the wedding, I was surprised. I didn't ask for a cent. In fact, I had spreadsheets ready to go, but they insisted. "Let us do this," my dad said. "We want to help." My mom was browsing caterers before I'd even said yes. I don't know. Maybe part of me wanted to believe it was real, that they finally saw me, that I wasn't just a supporting character in Vanessa's story. The day came and went like a dream. Laughing, crying, dancing barefoot under twinkle lights. My mom gave a toast that, for once, didn't include a story about how Vanessa won a spelling bee when she was 5. My dad hugged Eli and called him a good man. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt equal, just a little. Then came Monday. We were still winding down from the chaos. I was replying to messages, organizing photos, planning our mini moon. That's when I got an email from my dad. Subject line, wedding expenses. Attached, a PDF invoice. Itemized. Every detail accounted for, from flower arrangements to the customized menu cards. Total, $35,463.89. I thought it was a mistake, a joke maybe, but no. In the body of the email were 9 words. "Please settle this at your earliest convenience. Thanks, Dad." I stared at the screen for a full 5 minutes before I could move. My heart didn't even race, it just dropped. Eli came in, saw my face, and asked what happened. I handed him the laptop. His expression shifted from confused to furious in seconds. "It's not even about the money," I muttered. "It's about what it means." He nodded. They made it sound like a gift. And that was the problem. I hadn't asked them to pay for anything. They offered. They showed up to vendor meetings. They picked the freaking linens. And now they wanted me to reimburse them? Like it was a business transaction? Vanessa got a house. I got a bill. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it, all the fake enthusiasm, the rehearsed kindness, the subtle digs I'd overlooked for years. I realized this wasn't new. This was just the first time it had a price tag. By morning, I had made my decision. I wrote a check for the exact amount. Then I wrote a letter. No drama, no accusations, just the truth. I told them how I'd always felt like the backup daughter, how I'd never said anything when they praised Vanessa's every milestone while my achievements barely registered, how I truly believed, for once, they wanted to celebrate me, that their gift wasn't about generosity, it was bait. I said I was done accepting scraps and pretending it was love. I ended with this. Going forward, I won't be accepting financial help from you, not for holidays, emergencies, or anything else. I don't want inheritance. I don't want closure. I just want distance. Then I mailed it, logged into my bank app, watched the check process, blocked their numbers, and for the first time in years, I breathed. I thought it would end there, but of course, it didn't. Vanessa showed up, banging on my apartment door like she was the police and I had stolen a baby. She was yelling about family and drama and how I blew this way out of proportion. Said I should have just paid the invoice and moved on. That I was embarrassing them. I didn't open the door. Just sat on the couch, letting her voice ricochet off the walls. Eventually she left. But the messages didn't stop. Family members I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly opinionated. I got texts calling me ungrateful, entitled, dramatic. One cousin told me I was lucky to even have parents who wanted to pay for my wedding. Did they all forget the $400,000 Vanessa got? Or did they think she earned it, and I didn't? Eli tried to talk me into unplugging for a few days just to breathe. I did. I read. I cooked. I pet our cat until she was annoyed with me. I started writing this story because I needed to put it somewhere, to figure out if I really was the villain here. I still don't know. But I do know this. Silence feels better than pretending. I thought paying that invoice and mailing the letter would be the end of it. That maybe, just maybe, they'd take the money, read the letter, and if not understand, at least leave me alone. But I should have known better. 3 days later, I got an email from my mom. Not from her personal address that was already blocked. She used her work email. Smart move, I guess. I didn't recognize it until I opened the message. It was long, way too long. The tone, classic mom, self-righteous, passive-aggressive, wrapped in, we only did this because we love you energy. But here's the part that really got me. She said the invoice wasn't meant to be taken seriously, that it was all part of a life lesson, that they never intended to cash the check. They just wanted to see how I'd react. Her exact words, "We thought this would help you understand the value of financial responsibility." I read that line 5 times before I closed my laptop. They called it a test. A test. Like I was 13 and failed a quiz. Like I hadn't been financially independent since I was 16. Like I hadn't paid for every major thing in my life, my education, my apartment, my car, even my wedding dress. They called it a test. And when I passed it, when I paid, suddenly they wanted to pretend it was all some moral exercise. Nope. That check, already deposited, and I made sure it stayed that way. I replied with one sentence. Thank you for confirming this was intentional, not a misunderstanding. Then I blocked that work email too. I guess that's when Vanessa decided it was her turn to step in. She showed up at our place the next evening. No warning, just pounding on the door like the building was on fire. Lily, open the door. I didn't. She kept going. Said I was being childish. Said I was blowing everything up over nothing. That I had no right to be angry because Mom and Dad were just trying to teach me fiscal maturity. Her words, not mine. Coming from the woman who still uses our parents' Netflix login and doesn't know how to Venmo. I stayed quiet. Sat behind the door with Eli, just listening. I hit record on my phone just in case. Not because I thought she'd do something extreme, but because I wanted a record. Something real. Proof that I wasn't making it all up. She ranted for a solid 10 minutes. Claimed I was tearing the family apart. That I should be grateful our parents were even willing to do anything for me. That they could have just said no, but didn't. Then she said the thing that really did it. They were going to surprise you with a $100,000 gift once you paid the invoice. Like that made any of this okay. Like manipulating me into handing over money and then dangling a surprise carrot was some kind of generous gesture. She eventually left. Called me selfish on the way out. Eli made tea. I sat on the floor with the cat and tried not to cry. After that, it spread. Family chat groups, DMs, emails, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Suddenly, people who hadn't spoken to me in years had opinions. One aunt said I was spoiled. Another said I should apologize and be thankful. Thankful? For what? For being tricked? For being treated like an afterthought for 3 decades? For being gaslit by my own mother and sister? It was wild how quickly the narrative changed. Suddenly, I wasn't the daughter who paid her way through life. I was the ungrateful one. And Vanessa, of course, was the victim in all of this. The sister who tried to save me from my own tantrum. I didn't respond to any of it. But the silence, it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loud, heavy, like I could feel the whole family turning their backs at once. That's when Eli suggested I talk to someone outside the situation, just to get perspective. I wasn't expecting much, but I reached out to my Uncle Dad's younger brother. He's kind of the black sheep in our family. We don't talk much. He never shows up to holidays, and no one really mentions him unless they're making some offhand comment about how he burned bridges. But I figured, why not? He picked up on the second ring. We talked for over an hour, and what he told me? It changed everything. Apparently, my parents learned this kind of control from their parents. My uncle had gone through almost the exact same thing 20 years ago. Different situation, same playbook. Their parents offered help, then turned around and used it as leverage. He refused to play along, and they cut him off, blamed him, told everyone he was trying to steal from them. Sound familiar? My dad didn't defend him back then. He backed their parents, let the narrative spin. And now, he was doing the exact same thing, just wearing a different suit. Hearing that history laid out so clearly was surreal. This wasn't random. It wasn't even personal. It was patterned, passed down like a family recipe for dysfunction. They don't know how to love without control, my uncle said. And when you don't let them control you, they panic. It hit me like a brick. This wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't even about money. It was about power. And for the first time, I hadn't played my part. I hadn't cried, begged, or made peace just to keep things easy. I'd cut the cord, and they didn't know what to do with that. The next few days were quiet again, tense but quiet, until I got another voicemail, this time from my dad. His voice, it didn't sound angry. It sounded tired. He said he didn't want to lose me, that he was open to talking, no apology, no ownership. Just a worn-down man asking if I was willing to hear him out. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to meet him, to say everything I've held in for years, to ask, why was I always less? But another part knows what's waiting for me on the other side of that conversation. Guilt trips, half excuses, carefully worded blame. Still, something's shifting. For the first time, I don't feel small. I don't feel like the other sibling. I feel like someone who finally drew a line and meant it. I waited a week before deciding what to do about my dad's voicemail. Not because I was scared. Not exactly. I just needed time. Time to feel all of it. The betrayal, the weird grief, the strange calm that came after cutting off people you once thought were permanent. But eventually, I called him back. Not to make peace, not to forgive, just to see for myself if anything real was left between us. We met at a quiet coffee shop. Neutral ground. I picked a table in the corner facing the door. Eli offered to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. When my dad walked in, he looked older than I remembered. Like the past few weeks had carved something into his face. Or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time. He sat down slowly, didn't smile. We didn't talk for a full minute. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the check. My check, the one I sent after the invoice. He slid it across the table. I never cashed it, he said. We don't want your money. I didn't touch it, just stared at him. He went on and said he and Mom had realized things got out of hand, that they didn't mean to hurt me, that it was all a misunderstanding born out of concern. I let him talk. Let him circle around words like love and intention and family. But I didn't hear an apology. Not really. Just damage control. Finally, I cut in. You know I didn't need your money, right? I just needed to believe for once you were giving something without keeping a receipt. He didn't say anything. I kept going. Told him about all the years I'd felt invisible. How Vanessa's name came first in every conversation, every holiday card, every plan. How I learned to stop expecting and just survive around the silence. I told him how the invoice broke something, not because of the number at the bottom, but because it proved that even my wedding had conditions. He looked down at the check, folded it in half. Then again, "I don't want to lose you," he said, voice low. That should have moved me. Maybe 5 years ago it would have. But now, I just felt tired. "I'm not lost," I said. "I'm just done playing a role in a family script that was never written for me." He looked up. His eyes were glassy. But I didn't soften. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace, but real peace. The kind where you stop setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. So I told him I wasn't taking the check back. Not because I didn't need the money, but because I needed the boundary more. This wasn't about the wedding, I said. It was about everything before that, and everything you don't want to talk about. We sat there a while, not angry, not warm either, just still. Eventually he nodded, said he understood. I didn't believe him, but I appreciated the effort. When we stood up, he hugged me. It felt stiff, formal, like two people pretending to remember how that used to feel. I walked out first. That night, I told Eli everything. Every word, every look, every silence between the sentences. We sat on the couch, barefoot, a candle burning on the coffee table. It smelled like vanilla and something slightly burnt, like comfort with a flaw. I told him I wasn't going back. Not to family dinners, not to group chats, not to being the daughter who just swallows it. I'd drawn the line, and for once, I wasn't going to erase it when they cried. Vanessa still hasn't reached out. No surprise there. She posted a photo last week, her and my parents at some wine bar, clinking glasses. The caption said, "Grateful for real family." I didn't feel hurt, just distant. Like watching a show I used to care about but now couldn't follow. Some cousins unfollowed me. Others texted short, awkward things like, "Hope you're okay." One of them, Leah, actually apologized. Said she didn't realize how bad it had been growing up. That she'd always thought I liked being quiet. I don't blame them. When you're raised in a family like mine, silence becomes your second language. But not anymore. Since all this, Eli and I have been leaning into our life. We're planning to buy a little fixer up or outside the city. Somewhere with trees, maybe a porch swing. Somewhere peaceful. His parents have been amazing, supportive, no strings. They sent us a card last week, just a handwritten note that said, "We're proud of you both." I cried when I read it, not because it was dramatic, just because it was kind. And kindness, when you've lived without it for so long, feels like medicine. I'm not saying I've healed, not fully. Some wounds don't scar clean, but I'm no longer bleeding for people who call it love when they cut you. If I ever have a daughter, I'll teach her that love doesn't come with ledgers, that you don't owe people your silence just because they share your blood. And if I ever feel weak again, tempted to go back, to smooth things over, just to keep the peace, I'll remind myself of this one moment. Me, standing by the mailbox, check in hand, heart shaking but steady, choosing myself, not in spite of my family, because of them. Sometimes closure isn't a reunion. Sometimes it's just the quiet click of a door you don't open anymore. And sometimes that's enough. Story 3. I was 17 this summer. My parents abandoned me. They called it a healing trip. Said it would be just the three of us, no siblings, no work, no interruptions. We flew to Spain, landed in Barcelona. They even bought matching sandals for all of us, like we were finally trying to be a real family. I let myself believe it. I'm Lena. I was the classic difficult daughter, or so they said. I'd been skipping classes, failing trig, getting into it with girls who whispered behind my back. My mom told people I was going through a phase. My dad just nodded and grunted. They didn't care about fixing anything, they just wanted me quieter, easier. When they handed me the plane tickets and said we needed a break, I wanted to believe it meant something. Maybe it was the start of something better. The first couple of days, not awful. We wandered Gothic quarter alleys, ate paella on the beach, pretended like we weren't all quietly seething beneath the smiles. My mom even linked arms with me while waiting for a tour bus. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were mending. Then came the day we were supposed to fly home. We had breakfast together in the hotel. My mom wore her big deal lipstick, the crimson one she only used when something was about to go down. My dad, as always, buried himself in his newspaper without flipping a single page. Just as we were about to check out, my mom turned to me with that tight smile and said, "We're just popping down the street to grab a few last-minute souvenirs. Be back in 15. I barely looked up, nodded, scrolled through texts from my best friend back home who wanted to know how the family reboot was going. They never came back. 15 minutes turned into an hour, then 2, then 5. When I finally asked the concierge if they'd seen my parents, the guy blinked and said, "The couple from room 407? They already checked out this morning." I didn't believe him until I tried my key card. It didn't work. I sprinted to the room empty. My suitcase? Gone. Passport? Gone. Even the beat-up backpack I carried everywhere was missing. There was no sign I'd ever even existed there. My parents had packed up everything of mine and left. I tried their phones straight to voicemail. Messages undeliverable, like I'd been ghosted by my own blood. The panic started slow, that cold, rising kind that hits in waves. I didn't know where to go, didn't even know what day it was anymore. I sat on the curb outside the hotel, knees pulled to my chest, trying not to completely break apart. I ended up sleeping in a metro station bathroom that night. Just me, a denim jacket, and a ball of fear I couldn't swallow. The next morning, I made it to the U.S. consulate. The woman behind the desk wore a navy blazer and a messy bun so tight it looked painful. She took my name, typed something into her terminal, and then gave me a look I'll never forget. "Your return flight was canceled," she said. "Your name is no longer listed as a dependent or emergency contact, and I'm really sorry." That's when it hit me. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. Later that night, I found something tucked inside the inner pocket of my jacket. A note. Just one line, written in my mom's flowery script. "You're 17. Old enough to survive. No goodbye. No love." Just a sentence sharp enough to draw blood. I curled up behind a bakery dumpster that night and cried until I couldn't breathe. I survived the first week by keeping quiet and staying small. I drank water from public fountains, used the hotel's leftover soap to scrub my face in gas station sinks. I didn't sleep much. My stomach constantly growled, and the fear of being arrested hovered like a shadow. On the third morning, I got caught. A loaf of bread had been left cooling on a metal rack behind the bakery. I thought I was alone. My fingers were on the crust when a hand clamped down on my wrist. I froze. The woman staring at me looked like she'd been carved from the earth's silver hair in a low twist. Apron dusted with flour, eyes like granite. I expected her to yell, call the cops, something. Instead, she just said, "If you're hungry, you work." Her name was Mariana. She was 71, owned the bakery, lived above it, and had no patience for pity. That day, I washed pans, swept floors, and scrubbed the front windows with aching arms. That night, she pointed to a cot in the back storage room and said, "You can sleep here. Don't steal again." It wasn't home, but it was shelter. She never asked me what happened. I think she already knew. Weeks passed. Mariana didn't say much, but I watched her closely. Learned the rhythm of the oven, the scent of perfectly proofed dough. She saved the loaves that were too lopsided to sell and left them wrapped in brown paper on my cot like little offerings. Quiet kindness in crust and carbs. I found a busted laptop in a recycling bin. Spent days scavenging old repair shops for parts. Got it running. Connected to the bakery's flaky Wi-Fi and enrolled in a free JED prep course. I studied beside the humming fridge, fingers sticky with cinnamon and flour. Sometimes when I stared too long at the screen, I'd feel the edge of that note still in my jacket, like it was watching me, daring me to prove it wrong. You're 17, old enough to survive. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to outgrow it. My first taste of real money came from a gamble. I read about a small shipping company restructuring in a discarded business paper. Used the €150 side stashed away for new shoes. The stock tripled in a month. And just like that, something inside me clicked. I wasn't just a girl abandoned in a foreign city anymore. I was learning how the game worked. Mariana caught me late one night cross-referencing earnings calls and market summaries. She squinted and said, "Playing stockbroker now?" I just smiled. She didn't press. I was addicted. I devoured YouTube lectures, scoured translated business forums, listened to podcasts at double speed while kneading dough. By 19, I had clients. By 21, I had investors. I registered a quiet consulting firm under a shell company, taught online classes, helped local vendors digitize their operations, even made a little side cash advising travelers on currency arbitrage. I sent anonymous donations to shelters in Texas, especially youth programs. It wasn't about guilt, it was about legacy. I wanted those girls to feel seen, but I never told anyone my real name, and I never stopped carrying that jacket, because that note wasn't just a scar. It was a challenge. One I was determined to win. It was a Sunday morning when Mariana slid the newspaper across the table. She didn't say anything, just tapped one square on the classifieds, a foreclosure notice in small print, the kind most people would skip. But I didn't. I knew the street, the zip code, the ugly beige mailbox with the crooked number 1465. That was their house. My parents' new beginning. The one they built after leaving me behind like a miscalculated expense, was now up for auction. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Not angry, not smug, just still. You spend enough time surviving, and silence starts to feel like control. When I looked up, Mariana was already pouring more coffee. "You going?" she asked, like we were talking about a neighborhood fair. I nodded. "Then we do it right." I didn't go back as Lena. I flew under a business alias, one I'd built clean, legal, and carefully distant from anything that could be traced back to the scared 17-year-old who once cried behind a bakery. We landed in Miami, then drove up to Broward County where the auction would take place. Mariana came with me, of course. She wore her usual no-nonsense linen and held the bidding paddle like she'd been born doing this. The crowd at the auction looked like a postcard. Retirees in sandals, sunburnt real estate sharks tapping iPads, and one guy who looked like he built his whole personality around golf polos. No one noticed us. When the auctioneer read out the address, my palms started to sweat. I didn't expect that. This house wasn't just drywall and flooring. It was the life they built on top of mine. It was the place they swore I was too broken to be part of. The bidding started. Some guy in a tan blazer made the first offer. We matched it, then he raised. Back and forth it went, each number chipping away at the distance between who I was then and who I'd become now. When the final number landed, Mariana raised the paddle one last time. The gavel came down. Sold. Bidder 146. Just like that, it was mine. Their home. Their safe little post-abandonment fantasy. Gone. Bought. And no clue who held the deed. We didn't celebrate. Didn't smile. Just walked to the car like it was another errand. But inside, I felt this cold, quiet satisfaction settle into place. Like closing a door that had stayed cracked open way too long. The official notice went out 2 weeks later. Certified mail, 30-day vacate order. Legal, emotionless language. I pictured their faces when they read it. Panic, confusion, denial. They had no idea who bought it. No clue that the same kid they once left on a hotel curb was now listed on the deed as primary owner. A week later, their lawyer called the business number tied to the shell company. Thought Mariana was the owner. Said the family wanted to request a meeting. Said they were willing to negotiate. I agreed to it. Not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to see the look in their eyes when they realized they were standing in front of a ghost they thought they buried. The meeting was set in a neutral real estate office just outside town. Clean carpets, generic art, walls that smelled like printer ink and stale coffee. I showed up early, pulled my hair back, wore a navy blazer, neutral makeup, the kind of look you wear when you want power without noise. They walked in late, my mother first, beige sweater, oversized sunglasses, the fragile routine she used when she wanted pity. My father followed, gripping a leather folder like it was a shield. They didn't recognize me at first. They sat across from me, tired and stiff, not a hint of familiarity on their faces. I didn't speak, just slowly took off my sunglasses. My mother froze. My father blinked once, then looked down. No one said a word for a long time. I broke the silence. You left me, I said, voice steady. In a foreign country, with no ID, no money, no goodbye. My mother flinched. We thought you'd hate us less if we just disappeared. Her voice cracked on the word disappeared. But I didn't believe it. Not the tremble, not the guilt. It was all performance. It always had been. She kept going. You were impossible, Lena. Always starting fights. We were drowning. And I was your lifeboat, I said. You just threw me overboard first. My dad finally looked up. Eyes hollow, voice brittle. I didn't think you'd survive. I stood up, pulled a folder from my bag, and slid the property deed across the table. Well, I said, I did. And now I own your house. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like she was watching her own life evaporate in front of her. Mariana walked in then, calm, clipboard in hand. She dropped a printed timeline of the move-out instructions in front of them. You have 26 days, she said, like she'd said it 100 times before. My mother looked up at her, eyes pleading. You can't do this. We're her parents. I turned back one last time. No, I said. You are my parents, and you made your decision. They sat there, quiet, stunned, deflated, not angry, just realizing they'd lost the one person who still might have cared. They tried to rewrite the story online after that, posted it on Facebook, claiming I was some twisted stranger. Said I'd been radicalized, that I'd tricked an old woman into helping me steal their home. My mom even posted a photo of the house, captioned, "We built this with love. Now it's been taken by cruelty." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The house didn't belong to love. It belonged to the girl they left behind. And now, it belonged to me. We gave the house a new name, the second room. Mariana came up with it. Said the first room, the one you're born into, doesn't always open. But everyone deserves a second. We tore down the cheesy motivational signs, repainted the walls a soft sky blue, built bunk beds in the master bedroom, 4 lockboxes, new mattresses, soft sheets, fresh towels. We turned the kitchen into a communal hub, a long wood table, chipped ceramic mugs, the scent of cinnamon and cardamom in the air. It didn't take long for the first girls to arrive. One had been couch hopping since 16. Another cried when we gave her socks still in their packaging. Mariana just smiled. Let them breathe, she said. The rest comes later. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched it happen, quietly, exactly how I wanted it. Spring came fast that year. The kind of spring where sunlight doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives, cracking open windows, warming tile floors, brushing dust off your shoulders like a friend who never stopped waiting. By then, the second room had 6 girls. No screaming, no slammed doors, just quiet movement, shared space, borrowed sweaters. Most of them didn't talk much in the beginning. Some didn't talk at all, but they all stayed. Mariana baked more often. On Wednesdays, the kitchen smelled like orange peel and honey. Her hands never slowed. She'd hum softly. Old songs I didn't know but always made the room feel softer. We never talked about my parents again. Not directly. But I knew Mariana was watching when I paused a little too long by the mailbox. I knew she noticed when I folded up their final letter without opening it. They tried. After the eviction went through, they started showing up in indirect ways. A package with no return address. A donation made under a name I hadn't heard in 10 years. A card signed. Still your mother. But it wasn't about them anymore. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I still kept the jacket. The one I wore in Spain the day they left me. I didn't wear it anymore. Not because I hated it, but because it served its purpose. Inside the pocket, I left the note where it always was. You're 17, old enough to survive. Sometimes I'd hold it for a second, fingers brushing that folded edge, and then set it right back. That girl? She survived, and I didn't need to carry her weight anymore. Now, we were building something. We held our first open house on a Thursday. 6 girls, 2 folding chairs, and a hand-painted sign that said, "Come as you are, leave stronger." A local youth org dropped off care kits. Someone donated books. One woman brought us toothbrushes, unopened packs, like they were gold. That night, I watched one of the girls, Kiara, brush her hair in the hallway mirror. She didn't notice me. She was just humming, swaying slightly like music was only for her. Another was asleep on the couch, one hand clutching a paperback she hadn't finished. I stood on the porch. The air smelled like warm sugar and lemon soap. You could hear someone laughing through the window. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. Mariana stepped beside me, handed me a mug of peppermint tea, and didn't say anything at first. Just looked. "You still feel like you don't have a home?" she asked finally. I looked around. Shoes by the door. A jacket slung over the banister. The sound of someone softly tuning a beat-up guitar in the next room. "No," I said. "This is the home I needed before I even knew what home meant." She nodded like she already knew that answer. We stayed out there for a while. No rush to be anywhere else. A month later, someone sent me a screenshot. It was a Facebook post from my mother. Long caption. Photo of their packed boxes on the porch. They stole our home. They tricked us. Betrayed by the child we loved. Please pray for us in this time of cruelty. I read it, then deleted the message. Didn't respond. Didn't explain. Let them talk. Let them shape a story where they were the wounded ones, and I was the storm. I didn't need to defend anything. Some truths speak loudest in silence. Here's what never made it into their version of the story. That I built the foundation they ignored. That every girl who walked through our front door walked into safety they never gave me. That healing doesn't come with rage. It comes with stillness and boundaries, and the decision to live better than they imagined I could. They called me heartless, said I was cold. But the truth? I just stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. People asked if I forgave them. Even Mariana once, while cleaning the pantry. I thought about it. Forgiveness is tricky. Everyone thinks it means letting someone back in. But for me, forgiveness was simply no longer carrying them forward. I didn't forgive them for their sake. I forgave them for mine. Because dragging that weight around gets heavy. And I was done carrying things that didn't help me grow. The last piece of mail I got from them was a letter. Handwritten. Folded neatly. Inside was a photo of the 3 of us in Barcelona. That last day. My mother in her coral lipstick. My father gripping his paper like a lifeline. Me, in the middle, smile stretched too tight. On the back, in my father's shaky script, "We thought we were giving you freedom. Maybe we were just trying to escape ourselves. No return address, no phone number. Just that." I put the photo in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but because history matters. And sometimes you need the full picture, even the part that still stings, to remember how far you've come. The second room grew. We added another bunk, another set of lockboxes. Mariana started teaching Sunday baking classes to local teens. The waiting list hit 20 girls by summer. One of them asked me once, "Are you, like, the boss here?" I laughed. "No," I said. "This place doesn't have a boss. just people who didn't give up. She looked at me for a second, then nodded like she understood. She did. They all did, because that's what made it work. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about return, about rebuilding something real in the shadow of what almost broke you. So, if you're wondering how this ends, it doesn't. It becomes something else. Not a mansion, not a social media victory, just a yellow house in a Florida suburb, with chipped porch steps and sunlight in every room, where girls who were once left behind now find a second door. And this time, it's wide open.